What's going on, Titans fans? Welcome back into the Morning Glory Show, live every Thursday morning, 7 a.m. Central Standard Time. So if you're tuning in for the first time, as people are tuning in, I can see the numbers going up. Make sure you do us a couple things. Head over to YouTube, type in Glory Days Sports, where you can follow me over on Twitter as well. Hit that subscribe button over on YouTube, though. Drop us a comment. Join the chat as we talk all things Titans as we approach April and we hop into this draft more and more. But on my other side, we have my co-host, as always, Jonathan Miller at Esports Valen, or you can follow him over on TikTok at All Things Titans. How you doing today, Jonathan?
Good, man. Feeling good. About to take a trip here, so the podcast is coming right in at the last minute, the 2-minute drive, if you will. But yeah, feeling good. Thank God TikTok did not go down. That would have been my whole brand just flushed down the toilet. But it's been pretty good so far, and I'm excited. We have some really interesting topics here as the Titans sit at pick one.
Yeah, TikTok has definitely been blowing up for you here lately. And we hopped in those lives after last week or a couple weeks ago after the Rankarthon firing and all that, and talked about that and all the first round picks and stuff. So go follow them over there as well. But even though we're in the offseason as Titans fans, the news has been churning. I mean, this has been a busy week if you're just a football fan in general. I know Washington, the Commanders, they upset Detroit Lions and Dan Campbell over there in last week's games as we approach these conference championships. This week, you got the big hiring in the Titans organization.
Big.
And that's the hiring of John Bones Jones, bringing him in there. And
I wish we had Bones Jones.
I know, right? We do bring in the Gonzi scheme. Mike Bergonzi has his press conference yesterday, and we got Senior Bowl coming up next week. Yes, we got the Senior Bowl next week as well. I know they are flying out to the East West Shrine today, so that's a big thing that we'll talk about. But I wanted to hop into this press conference and just get your overall view to start, and just the Gonzi hiring. We didn't get your takes on Rankarthon getting fired because of the show last week. It was just me and B Will. So I just wanted to open it up with that. And what are your overall thoughts on just the process the Titans have had throughout this?
Yeah. To be completely honest, I had the same reaction as everybody else. Just to touch on the Rankarthon thing really quick. I know that's old news at this point, but I had the same reaction as most people, where I was completely shocked. I was angry, honestly. I really liked Rankarthon. I thought, he did some serious fan service, which is really what we're seeing that style of team building is, which, as Titans fans, we haven't really got to live through that. Like, for the most part, a lot of our general managers are conservative, poor drafters. So for the greater part of our history, minus, hitting on all the running backs, which is something. But yeah, it was kind of sad to see at first. But after I kind of sat with it for about a half a day or so, the person's opinion that I enjoyed the most, and I think I shared the opinion with the most, was Easton Freeze. Who's a local media member here.
Friend of the show.
Yeah. So Easton, I felt like, was the most level-headed opinion through it, which was like, look, like let's take a look at the facts. Let's see what he did. And then I actually don't hate the firing based on these things, right? So my opinion was, I basically drafted, toward that train of thought. So though I hated it at first, I see the vision, right? Essentially, we didn't know why at the time, but Rand fell out of favor with Miss Amy, and Chad didn't. I made the assumption, which is what's coming out now, which is basically what happened, where Rand, his path to building the team was very aggressive and spending a ton of money, which at the time Amy was like, okay, this sounds right. We were all super excited about it. I mean, you can't get more exciting than signing the top receiver in free agency and trading for the best corner in the game at the time. So, I mean, how you can't possibly get upset about that. But it didn't pan out. L'Jarius ended up not playing, mostly because they found that his injury was potentially more serious. I think the real reason was they knew the season was chalked by the time he needed. So they're like, let's just sit him, which is fine. Whatever. I'm not mad at L'Jarius. And then Calvin, who, despite many drops, like, he kind of carried the drop issues that he had from previous teams, which was the primary concern with his game. But he still was a 1,000-yard receiver. Despite that, he had a couple of really big game-breaking games, which we knew he's capable of. and the great inconsistencies at quarterback, he was still 1,000-yard receiver. So there's still some optimism there. And when everything's said and done, he's not going to be the highest paid. He's like outside of the top 18 right now of highest paid receivers. So you live with that happily. So anyways, they move on from Rand. It makes sense. They want to go towards the Green Bay Packer way of draft, develop, be frugal in free agency, pick up where you need, and then sign your guys, move on from the ones you don't like, and then develop your players, which is all fine and good. Every team wants to do that, by the way, guys. That is not a special thing. Like, you going and being aggressive, you do that situationally. You don't do it when you're clearly in a rebuild, which is what the Titans were. So Rand took a big swing in hoping that he could turn this team around fast enough to where they could kind of get a winning culture under their sails. Unfortunately, the quarterback did not pan out. So here they are. So all of that made sense. I know there's a lot of like pressure on Miss Amy right now as the owner, and I think that she definitely could have handled the process a little bit better in some ways. I think the real thing that is like the primary issue, in my opinion, is that her communication. She's not talking. And that's probably because she doesn't want to get grilled. If she says the wrong thing, then it puts a lot of pressure on her to sell. If she employs people and they speak for her, then that's just kind of how it goes. Like, most of the time in most businesses, your owners, the board members are not the ones speaking to the public. They empower people and they hire people at the top who are in charge that do the speaking for them. So this is very normal. So I don't really understand the outrage there. I get it. Titans fans are like, we want answers. Why are you doing this? And the answer is probably, I'm just doing what I think is best for the team. And I'm not perfectly qualified to do so, and yada, yada, yada. So it makes sense. Like, I'm not mad at her. I think a lot of the decisions she's made are mostly good. And I was happy with the J-Rob hiring because it ended up really good. And then it turned out not great. I was happy with the Mike Vrabel. I was okay with the Mike Mularkey elevation. And then it turned out okay. And then it whatever, right? And then I was happy with the Mike Vrabel hiring because it turned out great. And then it ended not great. So you see him saying, like, she's done mostly very good things. And I'm happy with Chad Brinker. I really like him. I like his analytics background, which is what he initially brought to the team. He made this team an analytics-focused front office, which I think is modern NFL. I like the Brian Callahan hire. I still do. I think that he is a modern coach. I think he's a true quarterback developer, which is what the Titans honestly haven't had in a head coach since maybe Ken Wisenhunt. And you could really argue that he wasn't a quarterback coach. He was just an offensive mind, like a West Coast offense type of guy. Like, that's really the only like offensive mind we've had at head coach besides Brian. So it kind of missed me with all the we can't develop quarterback stuff. And then, Mike Borgonzi as a hire is fantastic. This is a 16-year veteran in the Chiefs front office who has held almost every single position in the front office that you can hold. And he's been a part of winning culture. The fun fact here, he started with Kansas City when they were the worst team in the NFL. They had the number 1 overall pick. He was under Scott Pioli, which was the general manager at the time. And then he was a part of the team that scouted, drafted traded and then drafted Pat Mahomes and then developed Pat Mahomes. It's the one thing that a lot of Titans fans we're hoping that we could get from a quarterback. And that's the thing that might be exciting about a quarterback at number 1 is that you shouldn't expect that quarterback to go straight to starting, even whether it's Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. One of those guys are going to be sitting. Thank God. So there are so many exciting things about these new hires that Titans fans should be optimistic about. And also Titans fans should give Amy Adams Strunk credit for, because she is empowering the right people and making good hires. Rand Carthon wasn't a bad hire. It was just a different type of out. Like, if Will Levis hits, we're not having any of this conversation. And by the way, him hitting could have been a 7 or 8 win season. Him being the guy would have changed everything. It was a gamble. You rolled some dice and you didn't win. It happens all the time in the NFL. So yeah, I'm critical of her process. I wish she would talk more. That's where I lay. But overall, I'm good with these changes. I mean, look at it. Like, not only just Mike Borgonzi bringing him in and having Chad Brinker as your main brain trust guys leading the team, which are both proven winners and developers of talent in this league, but also you have the greatest special teams coach to ever coach in modern NFL, so much so that he was awarded interim head coach. That's how beloved he was.
Yeah.
As a special teams coordinator for the Rams. When Jeff Fisher was fired, he took over as the interim towards the end of the season, secured the number 1 pick, got the golf thing going on. But you guys see what I'm saying, or the number 2 pick, I forget which one it was. John Bones Fossil is an incredible special teams coordinator. And if this were a coordinator of either the offense or defense, we would be like doing backflips, like, oh, this is such a big deal. He is going to change the game from a special team standpoint. So I'll leave it at that. I'll pass it back to you. But overall, my thoughts on all of this movement is, wow, that's a little chaotic. Wasn't expecting that. Very happy with the result. That's kind of where I lay.
Yeah, we'll dive into some of these comments because Ed Henry here brings up a good point that I was going to bring up as well. And to the bad processes can lead to good results, and good process can lead to bad results. And we're the predicate of many of both of those processes. The process of getting Vrabel was horrible. And a lot of that does come down to Amy, who I've been hypercritical of throughout these last couple of years. And I think she's kind of gotten to the place where she understands this is above her pay grade in regards to understanding the game.
Yep.
And when you promote a guy like Chad Brinker, and we could talk about this as well, the final decision making. That's been the talk for this last week since Chad came out and said, "Hey, I'm the final decision maker." And I feel like
so annoying, Jake.
Overblown.
It is, bro. It is in the massive way. Sorry, I'm not going to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, you're good. Yeah, so it's like he's the tiebreaker in my opinion. And they kind of elaborated a little bit more in the presser yesterday. It starts with Brian, it flows up to Mike, and then it goes to Chad, and then it eventually goes to Amy. But at that point in time, he gave, I think it was Bergonzi gave that stairwell analogy where last season they had Callahan and Rand, and basically they're coming up 2 different flights of stairs, and then Amy's at the top. Yep. And she didn't like that. And it's not good process to have her making that decision there. So I do agree the firing of Rand Carthon was bad process, but it could be a good result in getting Mike Bergonzi. And I think Chad Brinker did a good job of facilitating that hire in Told, just because he started this relationship with Bergonzi in that L'Jarius Sneed trade, it sounds like, for the most part. So those two were the guys going back and forth and really elaborating upon that and pushing that through. And then we have the DeAndre Hopkins trade this season as well. I haven't heard news about that, but I'm assuming those were the two going back and forth on that deal as well. So yeah, I think overall how we've gotten here may not be the best, but it's putting us in a good position still. I think there is a realm of possibility where Bergonzi is the next great GM. I think he is the most highly qualified guy that was on the market. And you look at this all these teams that were looking for GMs this season, we got ahead of it. Brinker did a good job of evaluating the talent. And I think he picked the right guy. And you see guys like Spytek getting a job yesterday as well. And these other guys that they were bringing interviews, they got their pick of the litter. I'm perfectly good with that. And Brinker talked about it last week as he wants a football guy all the time. And that was one of the knocks people had against Rand Carthon these last couple of years was these all-star games, the Senior Bowl, the East-West Shrine, the Hula Bowl. He wasn't there in person, which I think is a catch-22 because they drafted, 6 of their 7 players from the Senior Bowl, even though he wasn't there. And most of them were great. So it's like, I don't understand.
What does that tell you, Jake? Guess who was at the Senior Bowl?
Yeah.
Chad Brinker.
He was indeed. He was the only one, if I remember correctly. And throughout this process, it's not only Mike going and Chad going, but from my understanding, Brian's going and much of the staff is going this season as well. So you can't complain in that, right? And these guys last season we had Brian that was constructing his staff, which was probably the primary reason he wasn't there in attendance. And maybe Rand was helping out with that as well. But at the end of the day, you're going to have asses in seats out there and evaluating this talent. I don't think they're going to be starting this board from scratch. I think a lot of this is going to be carried over from people that were already there. But this is a good time
you say
for
that,
all
though.
This
is the first. This interesting. You say that though. Very interesting because something that wasn't as highly reported, but along with the Rand Carthon firing and the Anthony Robinson firing, who was his AGM, they fired, I want to say 5 of their recruiting staff or people that were in their front office adminship, which is an important note because they had a lot of carryovers from John Robinson's team. So going into this upcoming season, we actually are probably going to have the most different front office in terms of scouting, advanced scouting, all of that, all those people, a lot of those people, there's going to be a nice chunk of them that are not returning from what we've seen from J-Rob's regime. So it's actually interesting. I think there's a good chance that we're going to see a little bit different of a philosophy going in. And you have to think Mike Borgonzi, they've done a good job with their drafting as well. So you got to think he's probably going to want to pull some of his people over. He'll probably steal a guy or two from Kansas City, elevate them, promote them in some way. But I would assume that he's going to want some of his guys. Now, one thing I want to touch on right there that is a really good point is very, very clear. The whole hierarchy thing, guys, it's so overblown and it's so frustrating. We know what happened. We know that they had to fire Rand Carthon quickly because they wanted to get a jump on their GM search ahead of a couple of other teams, right? We know that. We know next that Amy is not exactly the most poised. Like she'll make a quick decision, which I respect her for, by the way. But she doesn't want to sit in the line of fire and get criticized, which is fair. Her team, she just spent the second most, I want to say, or maybe it was the first most last year in free agency money. And now you end up with only 3 wins. So sitting in the line of fire, getting grilled, probably not something she cares to do. She owns the team. She doesn't have to, right? Totally get it. It's fine. The next part of it is when you are someone who I have had many jobs, and the one that I can use that maybe a lot of the people in the audience will understand best was at the Dallas Mavericks. I'm not afraid to say this now. I won't name any names, but we had people in positions of power that were controlling decisions in a certain area of the business that had no business making those decisions, meaning they were obviously a respected leader in the company, but they did not have the expertise to be like, I should have the final say. I'm going to make the best decision. And it ended up costing us in a couple of ways because they were making decisions on things that they really had no business making a final decision on. Now, you're either 2 types of leader. You're either the leader who cares about the power that you have and you want to have the final decision because you're the boss, or, and I'm not talking about Mark Cuban, by the way, it's someone else, but I just want to make that clear. Or you're the other leader who says, you know what? I'm not best suited for this decision. I need to surround myself with people who are experts in this area, and we'll make a decision together, and I'll support my team in that decision, right? We're going to make this decision. That's why you hear him say it all the time. Well, not one person is going to make the decision. We're going to do it together. And And Chad Brinker did a great job in the press conference when he sat with Mike and saying hey, I don't know if you guys caught this, but I thought this was awesome. They actually gave us a peer inside of their process where when they're evaluating talent, the GM doesn't just sit at the top like the Lord and sit on top of his throne and, all right, guys, tell me what we got. Some of them do that. Those are bad GMs. What Chad Brinker was telling you they do is everyone, including Chad Brinker at the very, very top, is going to scout players, create his own scouting report, and collectively as a team, they're going to share those reports. And the reason why you do that is because me evaluating Shedeur Sanders versus you evaluating Shedeur Sanders, we might see something differently. And you want as many opinions and a collective hive mind of what do we understand this guy as? Because guess what? If 25 people all go, this guy is fantastic and we need to take him, then they're going to go, okay, guys, we need to take this kid. And we all feel the same way. That means we're seeing the same thing. And so being able to have a full evaluation process and be happy with everyone's opinions that you have on your team, that is very valuable. And that's essentially what Chad Brinker said. So all of us sitting here well, Chad's going to have the final say, so why not just give him the GM title? You can't fire Rand Carthon and then give him the GM title without going through proper due process. The NFL almost immediately came in and did an investigation. It was like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, well, no, it's a GM job for sure. They misspoke. Burke Nihill came out, because he's the fall guy. He's the CEO. So it's his job to be the fall guy. He's going to get the criticism. Miss Amy doesn't have to do that. She gets to pay Burke millions of dollars, I'm sure, a year to be that guy. She empowers me to speak. Yes, you're going to be the one that's criticized when you say something dumb, not the owner. So I'm totally fine with this the entire time though, over the past week and a half, I'm just sitting here like, come on, guys. Like, are we really just making this a thing? Are we really going to be up in arms about this? Like, if you really analyze the situation, it was a very normal business thing. It's not normal in the fact that she should have said something outside of like a typed message. Like, I really liked the video she did with Mike Keith last year, or was it the year before? Yeah, with Brian Callahan when they were kind of talking about the coach situation. I thought that was good. I thought she gave us, it was very scripted and very obvious and proper, whatever, but give us something where we can see your face, where the words are coming out of your face. So I wish we would have had that. But outside of that, this process is very simple. She is not going to take the power of saying, okay, I'm going to Jerry Jones this. No, guys. I know you guys all want Cam Ward, but I want Shedeur. Draft him. I don't care. Those are other owners. That's Woody Johnson. That's Jerry Jones. That's those guys, right? That's Mark Davis, whatever. But what you're not going to get from Amy is to claim that she's a better football mind or knows ball and can evaluate talent better than some of the best who have proven it and won championships. Do you realize everyone in the front office has a Super Bowl ring, including our head coach? Can we all, hey, time out. If I had a whistle, I'd be blowing it. Time out, everybody. Do you understand that we have championship leaders in the Titans organization right now? And who's responsible for that? Well, it's Amy Adams Strunk, right? Maybe you can give Rand Carthon some praise too on that too, right? He's technically hired Chad Brinker. But my point is that this is a championship front office and championship leadership where the Titans fans should be very excited. Now, where they go with the number one pick, what they decide to do in free agency for those key signings, that is going to be very key. But I would suspect that it's not at 90 miles an hour like it was with Rand Carthon last year.
Exactly. And MB in the chat, the same decision makers that hired Carthon also hired Borgo. I'm tired of optimism for trigger happy Amy. No optimism, just waiting on results.
That's fair,
just because you have a ring doesn't mean you did a thing to lead the charge. And I do agree with that to an extent. But at the same time, I think what Amy has kind of come to learn for her own self is that she can operate more so as a shadow owner at this point in time. And I think some of the biggest things was, as these last few years, I think the people in her ear weren't telling her a lot of the greatest things. And I think you bring in a guy like Chad, who's going to be basically the operator of that. And I think that's going to see the change. If you viewed Chad Brinker as the owner, we can say, and say he's the guy operating within those fines, you're going to be pretty happy, I think, because he's going to do the scouting reports, like you said, and going back to this collaboration that they preached all last year, I think it does work. And having Chad do a scouting report and stuff like that, I think that's very good. But at the end of the day, you have to have the delegation amongst those tasks.
100%.
And I think that's where it kind of fell off is, yeah, we're going to collaborate. We're going to hunt together and we can say all these things. But at the end of the day, is the work getting done? And it may just not have been getting done. So you put a guy like Chad at the top who's delegating to Mike or Burke, who's then delegating down to Callahan. And then Callahan is delegating amongst his coaches. You're getting winners amongst everything. And I know Chad talked about it. We want this Packers way all last week and with the way we're processing and going forward. But they're pulling in things from every winning organization. They're getting things from Green Bay. They're getting things from Kansas City. They're going over to Cincinnati and San Fran and pulling in these things and putting it together and making its own Titans way. And which is the biggest thing is we haven't had a culture here in Nashville for a very long time. And we're trying to pave our own path and make our own culture going forward. And this is the first year really of that. You can argue maybe last year with Callahan and finding out if he's the guy. And like Brinker had Snake in the comments says Callie's on the hot seat, which I would agree to an extent as well. It is getting back to kind of what MB said in the chat. You have to have the results. And
it's a warm seat.
It's definitely
like if he loses the first 2 games of the season, he won't be fired.
No,
like that would be a hot seat. It's
if
more
they go
like
0-6, he might be out the door.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think that goes to a lot of coaches right now. If you got to win games, and
let me comment on MB's comment really quickly. I want to respond to that. So he said that just because you have a ring doesn't mean that you were a part of who led to that result, right? This is what I would say. Obviously, Brian Callahan, as the quarterback coach of the Denver Broncos when they won with Peyton Manning, is not the primary reason for them winning, right? Like you give 90% of that credit to the players and the other 10% goes to the support staff, doing a good job, right? But what I will say, and it was the same thing for Chad Brinker. He was there during the Aaron Rodgers Super Bowl. And then, of course, Borgonzi has, he looks like Tom Brady at this point. Just because what we don't know is the specific decisions that were made or the specific things that they did that might have resulted to a championship win. But what we know, the reason why it matters, MB, is because these are guys who have seen championship teams and championship mentality. When you go the entire distance and you win it, you see all the guys in the locker room working hard. You see the front office staff being super relentless and making really good decisions and being a really good support staff. You see the process. Like you see a primary reason why Chad Brinker liked Borgonzi so much is because he talked about his work ethic. Like this guy's a grinder. He is a all ball, all day guy, right? So the difference is when you bring in someone who is good at their job in a poor place, just because they're good at their job doesn't mean that they're going to go and be good in a different environment. They might be good amongst people who are not good. And so they shine up, right? But their mentality, what's their mental like? Well, if you're really good and everyone around you sucks, then you're probably pretty cocky and frustrated and kind of more of an emotional trigger on your mind because you're like, man, these people suck, man. I'm the only one that's doing, anything around here versus someone who is doing well on a team of people who are doing well. Like it's the same thing that I was talking about with the players, right? If your quarterback is ascending and top of line and really good, then it elevates everyone on the team. It makes everyone better because the mentality is sharp. It's like, we're in this. No matter what, we're in this. If Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills start to lose, they're like, hey, it's all good. Josh is smacking everybody's hands. And guess what? The defensive lineman, the offensive lineman, the skill players or whatever, the corners, everyone's thinking Josh is a dog. We're in this. And it keeps that morale up. And morale and mental prowess is so important. Like you talked about, AJ Brown had a comment like when they were doing the whole book thing through the playoffs last week or whatever. He said, my physical game is sharp. I'm as good as I can be. But my mental game, I really need to work on that and get that better. So even someone like that who is an all-star in this game is like, hey, this game is 50% mental. So if you take that into consideration, having guys who have been a part of winning cultures who can then permeate that throughout the building to other people who haven't had that experience, that builds a winning mentality. Borgonzi knows that if something happens in the draft, okay, don't panic. We have this as an option. Whereas a Ran Carthon, who, again, I want to be clear, I loved Ran. Ran Carthon, who doesn't have the same experience as a Borgonzi or a Chad Brinker, something like that happens in the draft and he goes, no, thank you. No, it'll be fine. Which, by the way, I think he did great. I'm not criticizing Rand's draft strategies, but I'm just saying, I'm using that as an example. So keep that in mind too. Like adding these pieces, just because Brian Callahan is a Super Bowl winning quarterback coach doesn't necessarily mean that he's not capable of being a Super Bowl winning head coach, because he watched his head coach, John Fox. I'm not going to claim to know who the head coach of the Broncos team was. I can't remember.
No,
Kubiak? I don't know. Anyways, it might have been Kubiak. I can't remember. But either way, he watched that coach work. He watched his process. He watched everything about it. So he knows what a winning coach, what a Super Bowl winning coach should be looking like. So I feel awesome about where they're at right now. I know that I'm the optimist on this show, and sometimes I'm the blind optimist. I was pounding the table for Will Levis probably in the last hour. So I totally understand if you guys want to proceed with caution. I would as a Titans fan, because we all know how this thing goes. But what I will say is, at the very least, what I'm saying, I'm not claiming we are back. I'm simply saying
there
should be some optimism where you should be excited about the moves that they just made. Now we'll see. free agency, the draft, those things are coming. Who knows? We might drop a bag on Sam Darnold, and then you're going to see a very different response from me, potentially. So we'll see. But overall, what they just did in the recent week or two to prepare for their offseason and prepare for making the right choice at number one, I thought was pretty good.
I think Braden Gall put it well. I think it was this week on the football show after everything. We're talking about the optimism. And I think it's perfectly fine to be optimistic. I think it's good. It's healthy to be optimistic.
It is.
And he kind of gave the analogy of getting into a new relationship. You don't give it up on the first date. You don't have to be over the moon from the get-go. Wait several dates and figure it out. But if you're going into a relationship not thinking this is a potential future partner, what's the point? If you're coming into that relationship going, he's probably not it, she's probably not it, whatever, I don't think that's healthy. So having some optimism within this draft and this organization, I think is perfectly fine. But at the same time, you can't be overly optimistic either.
No.
And we'll go ahead and hop into some of Brinker Snake's questions here in just a second. But as we kind of close out this show, we kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the draft. I put out a little mock draft on Twitter, as I so often do, multiple times per week sometimes. And as we close in through February, March, and April, they're going to be warming up. And I just kind of put out that, hey, going edge might be one of the better options that we can go from there.
You're wild.
And I knew what I was doing as soon as I posted it, just kind of drop the ball and walk away kind of thing, because you know what's going to happen, especially with Titans Twitter. But I do believe
it worked on me. It worked. I was like,
it worked on. There's currently 35,000 people that have seen that post. So it's worked on quite a few.
Oh, man.
But let me elaborate a little bit, and then I'll hear you out as well. But basically, Chad Brinker and Bergonzi, they talk about we're looking at this generational player. You have to acquire one of these guys as we proceed forward through this draft process. And there's not a lot of that in this draft. If I'm just looking at blue chip style talent at the top of this draft, last year, I think I've said there was probably 7 or 8. Year before that, I would have said probably the same. This year, it's not like that. There's Travis Hunter, who I think is probably the closest that fits that generational talent build, which I hate even saying generational.
I
do too. Far overused.
Like, to me, generational and blue player are not the same. Like, a blue player is someone is like a can't miss prospect who is going to have a good NFL career, whether it's generational or not, you don't know, but you know they're going to be a top talent from that draft. That's what a blue player is to me. Generational is like Calvin Johnson, Adrian Peterson. Like, these are guys like Derrick Henry is generational, and he was picked in the second round. So I hate that term because it kind of misleads the draft. And as a reality, the guys who are going to be blue players from this draft, half of them are not going to be blue players on the scouting report today. You know what I'm saying?
You can't have a generational prospect in back-to-back drafts. It just doesn't work that way.
This is the same generation.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. So Travis Hunter, I think, is going to be the top of most people's draft boards just because we haven't seen what he's done in college football ever. And then you add in, I think behind him would be like an Abdul Carter out of Penn State, the edge rusher, who is a former inside linebacker converted to edge, but also has the physical traits of like a Micah Parsons, a Myles Garrett type of player. So I think that's where it kind of comes down to. And I picked Abdul Carter with the 101. And that's we'll start there. Just because I inserted it there doesn't mean they should. If they go that route, you should be trading back. You should be trying to work a trade with Cleveland or the Giants or potentially even like the Raiders at 6 or something like that. And then drafting that type of player. And you can really flip-flop either one of those. My biggest point is this is a very good edge class for draft concerns. You can't say, hey, there's going to be Abdul Carter next season. There's going to be another Myles Garrett next season. Because last year, Viatu Latu was the first edge rusher, and I think he was picked like 16 and wasn't even the best edge rusher this past season. It was 100%,
right?
I think it was Latu, then Turner, and then Verse.
Wait, did I get that wrong? I'm so sorry. I did. Wrong class, right?
No, Turner was last year.
Okay. Then he was Turner was Minnesota, so he was later also.
Yep. So I think it was Colts and then Turner, and then I think it was Verse, who was clearly the best edge rusher last year, and then Chop Robinson, who was, I think, fourth, who was right there with Verse, in my
opinion. Yeah, I was about to say you could argue
who was my edge one last year.
He was very efficient.
My own horn, who over in Miami was the leading in pressure percentage, I believe, out of this rookie class. But you can't just say there's going to be another edge rusher. But when we look at the Titans, they haven't drafted a edge in day one or the second round since 2018, with the longest tenured Titan on the team, Harold Landry, who is in the eclipse of his career and probably on that slow decline as he heads toward the end, and might not be there for a few more years. So my thought concept behind this is, if you can get a premier top 4 to 6 edge rusher in the league in Abdul Carter as he progresses into his career, and then in the second round, that's where the cream of the crop is. I don't like a lot of prospects at the start of that second round, but maybe you can have a guy that falls there, like who I drafted, which was Landon Jackson out of Arkansas, who is this huge, long edge pause. But when you look at this Denard Wilson defense, what he's trying to do, what we saw this past season, is you have a Jeffrey Simmons and a Tavondre Sweat in the middle, and you're relying on these edges to set the edge. And last season, Arden Key and Harold Landry could not get it done. You add in a Jackson, who can also rush the passer and generate those sack numbers, but maybe it's not him. Maybe a Jack Sawyer, a now national championship team, or a JT Tuimoloau, or Nick Scourton, or Shamar Stewart, or Michael Williams, or Princely. I'm not even trying to pronounce the last name, or Kyle Kennard. There's so many other edges at the top of the second that could really benefit there. I think if you insert 2 rookies and generate this pressure, I think that could help elevate whoever this quarterback's going to be, and Denard Wilson, to that next level. Because I know the argument it's going to be made that you have to get the quarterback. You have to get Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, who I'm big fan of both of them. And I'm perfectly fine if they go that route. I want to be very clear with that. You got to have a quarterback, and we haven't had one in many years. And it's not Will Levis. You can't retread that next season. You have to bring in either a veteran or a rookie this year. But when you look at the first quarterback taken in past years' drafts and where they are now, there's not another one in the playoffs right now. I can tell you that. Caleb Williams isn't there. Bryce Young isn't there. Kenny Pickett, Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, Mitchell Trubisky, Jared Goff. None of these guys are playing on Saturday or Sunday this week. So I know the biggest thing is people are coming out and saying, well, there's not a premier edge. Michael Parsons and Myles Garrett aren't playing. Doesn't mean that there aren't guys that were slightly behind in the first round aren't playing on Sunday or Saturday this year either. But I'll let you elaborate.
The blueprint is there, Jake. It just is. I've been having this conversation with a lot of people on TikTok. I've been doing some TikTok lives, and the conversation is always like, okay, who do you like, Shedeur or Cam? And I elaborate. And then the other question is, Titans have to trade down. None of these quarterbacks are worth taking, yada, yada, right? And my response to that is always, have you watched the tape? Or are you just going off of what you saw on Sunday? Or are you going off of what some analyst is saying? Are you getting Nick Wright's opinion on what he thinks about Shedeur Sanders or whatever, right? It's like so much of sports media is going to give you what's hot and what's popular, whether it's right or wrong. They just are, right? It's all about catching attention, being a buzz. Like, that's just what it's about, right? So what I did, and you know this because I even said it on this show, while we were in season, before the year was over, I said Cam Ward was not even worth a first-round pick. Not even worth a first-round pick, right? that was before I actually watched the tape.
Mm-hmm.
Before I took the time and sat down and watched literally over 100 of his throws, right? Once I did that, after a couple games, I watched the Duke game, West Virginia, the Florida game, and then there was another one that I watched all together. It was 4 games at the same time. I left that like session, if you will, thinking this kid is way better than I've been perceived to know, right? And all I was going off of was the couple of games that I watched, the horrible pick that SportsCenter showed over and over again in the West Virginia game, I think it was. So it's like, yeah, naturally, if we're just looking at the surface level of talent evaluation, then it's easy. The national narrative is Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders are not worth a top pick. And guess what, Jake? Both of those guys are going to be top 6 picks. Guaranteed.
Oh, 100%.
Guaranteed. So what are we actually talking about? Let's talk about another scenario. If the Titans want to trade with, let's call it the Giants, right? Giants, Joe Shane, Dayball, they're coming back. They don't have a quarterback. They're desperate. They got to keep their jobs. Guess what? They're probably going to try to be aggressive and trade up, right? So let's say the Titans fall back to 3. It's a decent amount of picks, whatever. Titans are good with the trade, whatever, right? And they decide they want to trade up, and then Cam Ward is the first overall pick for the Giants, right? Let's say at the same time, you're also getting a call from the Raiders, because now it's John Spytek over there as the GM. And let's say you get a call from the Steelers. So you get 3 or 4 calls from 3 or 4 teams that are willing to trade up to number 1 to take a guy. So then at that point, through your evaluation, you have to think, okay, if 4 teams are willing to trade up to number 1 and pick one of these guys, it means that one of these guys are talented enough to do it. And guess what? If the Titans pass on Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, which right now I'm kind of leaning Cam Ward, but we'll get into this later into the offseason. We'll have plenty of time to talk about it. But if they pass on one of these guys and they hit, lights out. It's over, right? And I get it. A lot of people are worried about a lot of things, but let me just say, in watching the tape for both of these guys, both of these players are 100% worthy of the first overall pick for a multitude of reasons. One, the Titans have to have a quarterback. You just do. You cannot go forward without one. The only scenario where you can is if they go and get aggressive on a vet and they decide that, hey, Brian Callahan goes, hey, I'd rather have a vet. Like, let's not do this whole developmental thing. Though I think what they will do is sign a vet that Brian's comfortable with of playing, and they're still going to draft a quarterback. That quarterback is going to sit behind this vet, and it's going to be an Alex Smith situation in Kansas City. I think that's what's going to happen. But you have to go after the quarterback when you don't have one. This league, it's very straightforward. Mike Borgonzi said it. Chad Brinker alluded to it in his press conference or in his interview with Ramon, Kayla, and Will yesterday morning. They both talked about how they have to be aggressive at finding the next quarterback. They have to figure that out. So, whether it's, people are saying Jackson Dart in the later rounds, no shot. Like Cam Ward or Shedeur have the star power and ability to be franchise guys. Whether they'll be ready for that day one or not, I'm not arguing. I think they should sit. Either one of them should still sit, at least for most of the first season. So that's why I'm just so gung-ho on the Titans needing to stay at number 1, and they need to draft one of these quarterbacks. And the good news is, guys, is we still pick 34. So there's going to be a ton of first-round talent that's going to bleed into the top of the second round, just like every single year. And the Titans are then going to have an opportunity to they're at the top of the second, so they'll have an opportunity to trade down, or they can stick and pick one of these tackles that's going to fall over and get their right tackle, or they get a shot at one of these really good edge players that are going to be there. So the Titans have the ability to fill 2 major needs for their football team without doing squat. They can just stay put. That's how big it was for the Titans to get the first overall pick in this draft. So for people who are like I love Abdul Carter, and I wouldn't be truly infuriated if they took him because he's such an amazing player. But you just have to think, what's the most important need for your football team? What is it? Because if you're sitting at 1, people are wanting to kick the can to 2026, 2027, like, oh, we'll just wait for Arch. We don't know if Arch is going to declare next year. We don't know if Nico's going to declare next year. Hell, we don't know that Drew Aller is going to declare next year. You don't know anything, and you certainly don't know where you're going to land. The Titans, by absolute fluke happenstance, went from the pick 6 all the way down to pick 1 because some very fluky losses and wins happened. It was a total luck of the draw. Even when you are as bad as the Titans were this season, they still could have been picking 7. We could have been at pick 7 with just 1 week's results, just a snap of a finger. But thankfully, chance landed on the other side for the Titans. So now they're picking at number 1. So my point here is that you cannot control the future. You don't know that you'll land in a position to take a franchise quarterback. Jackson Dart is a good player, and he looks like there's a chance that he could be a guy, right? But he's not Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. Not even close. He doesn't hold a candlestick, in my opinion, to their talent and what their potential is. I like him, but he's not in the same category as these players. So to me, you don't have to spend anything extra. It's just your pick. You don't have to give up extra compensation, which Chad and Mike both said they value very highly. You just pick the player and you get the position figured out. You have your quarterback. Then think of it this way, guys. This is the last thing I'll say. The biggest thing here is that you take Cam or Shedeur, you sit him, you have a veteran like a Jameis Winston or a Derek Carr or whoever, right? You sign him to like a 1-year deal or something, and then you let them pilot the team so that they can be briefly competitive, right? You're not 3 or 4 win ball team anymore. And then you let this quarterback develop with Brian Callahan pressure free. He just gets to sit in the wings and learn and develop and take his time. And so when you have that, I'm cool. 5-win season, 4-win season, whatever. I don't care. You protect your fan base by giving them a star in the wings. Doesn't have to start right away. You start selling jerseys, you create hype and excitement, and then you can finally take your mind off of, do we have a guy? And you can truly focus on the long-term process of building a football team versus, oh shit, we think Will Levis is the guy. Like, give me Calvin Ridley, give me that guy. We got to pay Lloyd Cushenberry whatever he wants. Like, we got to figure this thing out, guys. Go. And then he doesn't work out, and then your entire franchise cripples to the ashes. But if you have that guy in the wings and he's there and you're confident he's going to develop like they were with Pat Mahomes, Pat was really raw. Mike Borgonzi talked about it in his presser. They knew he was special from the first practice, but they also knew that they didn't want to ruin or put him in a disadvantage. They wanted him to sit in the wings behind a smart veteran and learn. He did, and it panned out. I'm not saying that's going to happen with this next upcoming guy, but I am saying that model works with these two guys. Aaron Rodgers behind Brett Favre, Jordan Love behind Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes behind Alex Smith. Those are all examples of our front office leaders that have taken with this. So that's another reason why I'm confident they're probably going quarterback, because they're like, okay, time to prop it up. Who are we going to get? Because there's a handful of good veteran quarterbacks that they could bring in that will be, above average starters or average starters that they'll be able to learn from. Maybe it's not Jameis. That would kind of be a little bit, I love Jameis. That'd be a little bit of a clown show, honestly. But outside of that,
fun.
Fun. It would be fun. Give me Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders and give me Jameis Winston, and I'm buying both of the jerseys, and I'm showing up to every game. I don't care if we win 4 games. I am over the moon about it. So, yeah, I think that makes sense because obviously the business side of things, Amy is not going to tell them who to pick. But you can be damn sure that she is going to be a part of the conversation to say, guys, this has been dragged out. We have a new stadium on the horizon, and we can't be this bad with no direction. Give me a direction. Guess what a direction is, Jake? You don't even have to mess it up. You could be like, Cam Ward, okay, we feel great about him and his development. Draft him. Stick him behind. I don't give a – you know what I'm saying? Doesn't matter. Brian, get to work on him. You have an entire year to get him ready. All good, right? The Titans have never done that. They should have done it many times, and they have the opportunity to do it because they have the right brain trust for it. So hopefully that's my TED Talk. Thanks for coming to it. But it is quarterback at number 1. Abdul Carter is going to be a great Patriot.
We got to get out of here. So I'm going to close out the show and just final remarks. It's the age-old question, and I think we can agree upon that. It's either draft the quarterback and build around him or build around and develop for when you get the quarterback. I think we both agree the team needs development on other positions as well as a quarterback. The Titans are in a very bad position in that regard. It's if they go quarterback at 1, I want them to do at 1. I don't want them to trade back and allow, say, the Raiders to draft draft Cam Shador at 1, and they pick out the other one at 6, or whatever that looks like, or the Giants at 3 is a better analogy. I want you to have 100% commitment. I want you to be super involved in that guy and say, this is our guy. I want him moving forward. I don't want you to trade back. If you do trade back, I do think they look at a different position. That's all I'll say. I want you to have that conviction. And at the end of the day, there could be a Jaden Daniels, a CJ Stroud in this draft, potentially. But for each Jaden Daniels or CJ Stroud, there's 5 Mitchell Trubisky's. There's 5 Kenny Pickett's or Desmond Ritters of the world. There's a lot of those. So you could potentially waste that pick as well. I think a Carter Hunter type of blue chip talent is just safer. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a quarterback, you're not winning it all. So it's either delaying the inevitable or you're taking that swing this year. And we'll leave it at that. And we're going to get out of here. We appreciate everybody in the comments. I see lots of new faces. Brinkerhead Snake, thanks for joining us. I saw James. James, thanks for joining us as well. If you guys are tuning in for the first time, do us a couple favors. Head over to YouTube, Glory Day Sports, and hit that subscribe button. Also, you enter the chance to win a signed Tajay Spears jersey. We'll be giving it away as soon as we hit that 1,000 subscriber marks. Over 94% of you guys aren't subscribed. They're checking out the show. We wanted you to be a part of this great community with me, Jonathan, and B-Will. And then also go check out the merch down below as well. We've got that great hat, coffee mug. We know if you're tuning in today at this early hour, you're definitely a coffee drinker. So use a great mug.
Probably not any mayo in it either, huh?
Probably not any mayo anymore. And as you can tell on my other side, the Will Levis painting that Stoney Killy was so gracious to gift me.
Did Stoney paint that one also?
He did not paint this one. We'll work on another commission with Stoney here coming up. But yes, we'll add in some more stuff as we progress throughout the season. I'm sure B-Will be with us back to next Thursday as well, as we cover probably the East West Shrine as we approach the Senior Bowl and whatever else is happening in the Titans community. But we appreciate everybody in the comments. We will check you guys out next Thursday. Appreciate you. Peace.